All right. Part
Gotcha.
part two with combat cameraman Kevin McCall, United States Marine Corps. Kevin, let's pick up where we left off.
All right, so I got to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It's the biggest swamp the East Coast has to offer as far as bases go. I guess actually, I think Paris Island's a close second because that's a pretty nasty little swamp. But I got there and oh, when was it? It was the end of '03, so probably would have been November, December of 2003 that I got there. And by January, I was gone. I went to cold weather training up in mountain warfare cold weather training. I was getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and everything was kind of ramping up back then. It was a really I don't know. Everything was kind of iffy, and everyone was unsure what the future was going to hold. And with Iraq and Afghanistan and everything, it was pretty strange. But I was getting ready to go to Afghanistan, and I got back from cold weather training, and I was slated to go with a unit and everything. And then Haiti kicked off. There was a this was this would have been just at February of 2004, and I was put on an ACM, an air command movement, and I had 1.5 hours to pack to go to Haiti. So I was actually in the field. I got back from Bridgeport from cold weather training, and they put me into the MEFEX. The whole Marine Expeditionary Force has a big exercise that they do, and I was put on security forces, so I was basically standing with a rifle guarding the CP. I mean, it sucked, but that's what I was doing for 2 weeks. And I was finally, so I'd been in Japan. I've just gone to Bridgeport, and then I had been in the field for 2 weeks, and I was ready to just go and shower, and eat a cheeseburger and just relax and do nothing for a little bit. And I ended up, I got slated to go to Haiti, so they took me off post, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna take you back to the barracks, have a shower. We'll take you to the chow hall. You can get some food, but you already have your weapon, you already have your gear, you're ready to go." So they told me I was gonna be going for 15 days, and I packed for 15 days. I didn't think much of it. Like I said, I was already in the field, so I had all my junk was together. I was already on the move, so it kind of I already had the momentum. And 15 days was unrealistic. They shouldn't have told us that. it was a humanitarian mission, but we were supposed to go and kind of calm things down because there was this whole mess. And if you want to call it a civil war, you can. It was a coup, and there's questionable causes of it. I'm not going to go into, but uh, we had to go and kind of calm things down so that the UN could come in and they could do their peacekeeping operation. They could do all their humanitarian work, all this other stuff. And so we got there, and 15 days turned into 4.5 months
Jesus.
of being there. And our humanitarian mission, while it was humanitarian, we did a lot of med caps and den caps, a lot of food and water handouts. We helped people repair their water treatment facility. We went to a lot of orphanages, and we actually helped them rebuild their shelters, their kitchens, we did a lot of really good work. I actually, I have to try to find it. I made a really, there was this little girl at one of the orphanages named Daniela, and I remember it like clear as day. And I was just walking around taking photos, just doing my job. And I was kind of leaning up against the wall having a cigarette, and I felt something grab my hand, and I looked down, and there was this tiny little girl. I mean, she was probably like 4 or 5 years old. And I had to go back to this orphanage like 3 or 4 times over the 4 months that I was there. And every single time she found me, and we'd hold hands and walk around, and I'd do my job one handed, because I had her in the other. And that's a good memory. But we did a lot of bad stuff there too. And it's not that we were being bad; it's that we had to be Marines, and it wasn't a humanitarian mission. The government was being overthrown by gangs. The government itself was a gang. It was just a mess. It was an entire mess, and I really felt bad for the people. It was a turbulent time for them, and I saw a lot of a lot of really bad violence, the people on the people, the gangs on the gangs, because they were all trying to, vying for control of the territories and everything. But there was a lot of other stuff that we did while we were there too. I have a lot of fun stories, but about the place though, some that'll make you laugh, some that are pretty vulgar, and it was a bad time though. I'll say that it wasn't a fun time in my life, and I don't look back on it fondly. That place, Haiti, I feel for the people, and I'm not insulting them or putting them down either. They were kind and educated. It was strange. Everyone I met had a college degree. There's just no work for them. There was nothing for them to do. So they that is poverty, man. That was sad. It was really sad. I never saw anything else like that. Where there was trash piled in the streets, smoldering, and we had to actually do this whole operation called Operation Street Sweeper, where we would go out in the middle of the night and we contracted a bunch of dump trucks from wherever, a bunch of Haitian civilian dump trucks, and we would go out with excavators and just scoop up crap from the street. I mean, it was just piles of shit from years and years and years of them just throwing their trash there.
Jesus.
And it would get to a point where it was overgrowing. So they would put gas on it and they would try to burn it, but it was so humid and the trash itself was wet. It would just smolder and it was just this nasty fucking mess. I mean, it was bad. And it was not just like trash, it was like bodies and their sewage and the animals that live in those things. It was hideous. And I can smell it today. It was, like the smells that'll make you gag. But there's nothing like it. It's death. It's just smelled like death, and that's the best way to explain it. I'm not gonna go on that forever. I'm really sorry, but
But
I think a lot of people, a lot of guys who've been men, women who have been in these situations. If you tell them that smell, just the smell of death, they know what I'm talking about. It hits you like a wall. You can't help but gag, and it's not. It's like the taste of peanut butter. You can just think of it. It's there. It's always there. Like this was 21 years ago. It's fresh in my mind. So that was my big takeaway was how fragile human life is, but also how inexpensive human life is. We all think that it's so valuable and we need to cherish it and everything, and that's just true. We do need to cherish it, but it's not valuable at all. We're just little meat bags running around killing each other. It's really kind of sad, but yeah. Sorry.
man, don't
Can't,
apologize
can't
because
tell.
that's
I'm having a rough day, so I'm a little more morose than I was
hey
the
man,
other day.
you're good, brother. You never have to apologize. It's your story, man. Like if it's one of those days, it's one of those days, and we're here to talk about it.
I'll tell
Um,
you. I'll tell you a really funny story. Okay. So, you can actually go on Wikipedia now and you can see all of this because the FOIA and everything. So I'm not really giving anything but away, but we were doing a lot of reconnaissance missions and raids on passport factories, and they were making fake passports in Haiti for people who would pay for them, and a lot of terrorist organizations were willing to pay for them. So they were coming through. Anyway, we did a bunch of raids on them. And there was one, the first time I went out with the Recon guys, actually, I had never met any of them before. And much like getting with infantry, you have to kind of earn your salt, so to speak. Well, it's even worse with Recon because they're just looking at me like, who is this fucking peon? It's not even like he's a pogue. It's like, what is this? So I had to kind of prove who I was. And so I got there and I was being really professional and I said all the right things and I did all the right stuff. I gave them my kill card right away. It had all my serialized gear on it and what all my personal information, my blood type, all that. I was on point. So this was 2004 and I still had at the time the old tricolor camouflage utilities. I didn't the digital ones yet. So they were a little thinner, and they were more form fitting. And it was so humid in Haiti. Like everything, you were always just soaking wet. So I talked to all the guys. I was standing at the back of the Humvee. They were all up in the back of the Humvee. And we chatted for a little bit. I gave them all my info, and they were like, "Okay, this guy." I could see they were like, "Okay, this guy seems like he might be okay. We might be able to take this guy along with me." So it was time for me to get up in the Humvee, dude. So I'm like standing there, and I step up, and the whole crotch of my pants just blows out because my pants were like stuck to me because it was so wet. It was humid in me. But the worst part is I had no underwear.
Oh man, so it's all
So,
in the wind.
so I'm stepping up into the Humvee, everything's swinging in the wind, and all these guys I just met, and I'm trying to impress. They're all just staring at me swinging in the wind. And then they just cracked up. I was beat red, like it was humiliating. But they were good sports about it, and they were like, "Well, that sucks because now you got to go on this operation with your junk hanging out." And I did. Like our flak jackets. We didn't have. I didn't have. We had to wear our flaks, but we didn't have to wear our Kevlars because it was technically a humanitarian mission. And our flaks, we didn't have to wear our throat protectors or the groin protectors. So I didn't have a groin protector on. So, yeah, I mean, it was pretty obvious the whole time. And anyway, that night we finished the operation and we were heading back and we were going to stop at the airport and stay the night at the airport and then head back to the base in the morning. We got back to the airport and we're all hunkering down for the night, picking our places. And I noticed no one was in the back of the Humvee. So I just laid in the back of the Humvee. And I had this hole. I had to do something about it. And so I got my poncho liner and I stuffed it in my pants, So it was in there. Everything was protected. I felt good and I fell asleep. And when I woke up, oh my God, I had pulled the poncho liner out in my sleep, and the mosquitoes there are like the size of your fist, and they didn't touch the jewels, but my thighs were just like just. I mean, there were probably 50 bites on each thigh. They were the most polite mosquitoes though, because they left this they left the most sensitive area alone, and they just went for the thigh. I got these juicy Irish, Scottish, pale. I mean, they just went for it. So these mosquitoes just destroyed me, and that was it. That was a funny story. The next day, I was kind of walking bow-legged, and it was rough. It
Man.
was.
So, a lot of the Vietnam guys have told me about humidity, how it was not uncommon for that to be a thing then. I never thought about that in Haiti. So, like, what did you do? Did you have like a spare pair of pants somewhere? Did you have some nothing? Just
Well,
stuck with it.
so like I said, I went with 15 days worth of stuff. So I had
Okay,
like
okay.
3 sets camis. So I had one. I think it was one digital because the digital camis, like when they first came out, like the guys in boot camp got issued those, but all of us we got issued the other ones beforehand. We had to go buy them, and there's 175,000 Marines trying to buy them at the same time. There was just a shortage. It was hard to find them. Even the boots, you couldn't find them. But on top of all that, while we got a clothing allowance every year of like $100, the boots were $180. The trousers were 140. The top was like 160. I mean, it was stupid expensive for this stuff at the time. So the one set that I had, because you were required to have a pair, they just stayed in my bag. I wasn't gonna. It's like your Sunday clothes. I'm not gonna take my good clothes out. So I had 2 sets of camis. The ones that I blew the crotch out, I had a little sewing kit. I ended up sewing it back up a couple days later, and because I wasn't gonna swing my way through Haiti, and my helmet, for example, a lot of stuff wasn't replaceable right away. My helmet, so we had to carry our helmets. Like I wasn't wearing it, but we had to carry it on us. And most of us, it wasn't the newer lightweight Kevlar helmets. It's the old Kevlar helmet, the heavy one with the leather strap inside and the really thick cotton chin strap. You know what I mean? And that humidity just destroyed those chin straps. If we did wear our helmets while we were on post or something, we were just sweating into it, and it was just absorbing all of that nasty, nasty sweat.
Ah,
And then when we'd go on patrol, we'd hook our Kevlars to our flak, and it would just kind of dangle there by the chin strap. And so many just like something would happen and we'd have to run really quick, and just from bouncing the chin strap would break, so your helmet's just out of action. You just don't have a helmet. Oh, you have one, but you don't have a chin strap. So, and those things, they were so heavy that they just bounced if your chin strap wasn't on. They really sucked, man. I'm glad that they replaced them with those lighter weight Kevlars with the nylon harness. You know, those things were really good.
Well, I found a photograph searching yesterday. United States Marine Corps in Haiti, and I'll pull it up through here. It's one that at least is accredited to you. I will let you confirm that or not.
Yeah, that's
Um, but yeah, you've got taken on a patrol in Haiti. If I'm not mistaken, this is what with 3-8.
yeah, it was MAGTF 8. So yeah, it was 3-8. That was the landing team that was with us, and there were second LAR was there, Recon was there. There was a bunch of others, but yeah, this was 3-8. These guys right here, and I think we had gone to a school this day. I think this is in City Soleil up at the market though. This is up in the hills, in Port-au-Prince in the capital. Yeah, this is my photo.
Well, and I know you mentioned too, when we were talking the other day, I can't remember if it was on the recording or not, but that Haiti, you stated that Haiti wasn't a combat deployment, but in many ways, what you experienced out there, it was.
Yeah, we all saw combat. I mean, everyone. It was kind of nuts because the really short and skinny of it, and I'm not a historian, and everything I learned about it, I learned basically while I was there. So this is 20 something year old information in this drunk's head. So essentially, I'm not going to get into all the politics of it. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, then whatever. But America had kind of set up, I don't want to say a puppet government, but we had influenced the government there. Aristide was the president. And the people really wanted Aristide until he got into power and he started becoming somewhat corrupt, um, to where the people were fed up and the military decided that they were going to step up and like kind of make an uprising against Aristide and take the country back. So Aristide disbanded the military. So poof, all these guys go everywhere. Basically, they go home without their paychecks. And when they get home, they kind of start defending their neighborhoods because the military was the de facto police I mean, to my understanding, again, I may be incorrect in some of this, but this was little 19-year-old Kevin's understanding of it, and kind of over the years, everything that I've read and learned since kind of applied to it. But so Aristide disbanded the military and hired a gang called the Shamir, which means ghosts, I think, in Creole, and he hired the Shamir to be his personal bodyguards. And they were basically taking the military's place, and they were supposed to support him. And he was going to give them whatever they wanted and give them their territories and let them control outside of the port, which was, to my understanding, in my recollection, that was their main area. And that's where we fought most, was at the port. And then the Shamir kind of got wise to it. And they were like, well, hey, the military was going to overthrow the government. And then he hired us. Why don't we overthrow the government? So they basically ran Aristide out. He fled to the United States. And that's when we came in to kind of squash, not the uprising per se, but kind of squash the hostility toward the people, because there were, I mean, just these terrible, terrible things happening to the Haitian people. The Shamir was, all of the Red Cross supplies that were coming in, the Shamir was intercepting everything. And they would either hoard it themselves or trash it, burn it. They would just destroy it. They would sell it. They would get rid of it somehow. Because control of those supplies is control of the people. You control their food, you control them. You control their medicine, you control them. And they were getting people would get fed up with it and kind of try to fight them, and they would get those people along with their rival gang members, and they would fill up those big shipping containers with people and sink them in the harbor. I mean, it was just,
Jesus.
and we pulled a couple of those out while I was there. There were executions I mean, daily. Everywhere. We would go on patrol. We would leave our little base at the university and walk out. Say it was like a 4-hour patrol. So we would pass this one spot. about 2 hours into the patrol, and then we'd go on the rest of the way, and then we'd head on our way back, and we'd pass the same spot, and there would be all of a sudden a dead body there, and it's not just like somebody who was shot. I don't know if I can be so graphic about this, but
That's
like,
your call, Kevin.
but it's like, I mean, like, okay, the time I'm talking about specifically, this dude had been like, someone had a copper pipe, like if you can imagine a copper water pipe out of a house that had been broken on one end, and they stabbed him in the neck and ripped his throat out with it. And he's just laying there in our path. It's obviously a message to us. I never knew who this guy was. You know, I documented it. I took photos of it. You know, I made sure to get it from all angles, and I sent it up to. You know, I did my job. I sent it up to us too, and made sure that it was documented and recorded. But it was very obviously a threat toward us because they put this person in our path. But the fact of the matter is, like, whatever message they were trying to send wasn't relayed, because I just saw like a human being laying in my way. You know, like this is it's traumatic. It was horrible to see this. You know, it's like it's not something that haunts me. I don't think about it very often. It's not something that I can't get rid of necessarily, but it's definitely something I've carried with me emotionally, and I've applied it to my values, and just the things that I kind of hold dear in life. As far as my value of life and my perspective on it, it's it's changed a lot for me. So that Haiti did a lot, man. It it did a lot to me. It was unexpected. It was absolutely unexpected. I didn't even after I got back, I didn't expect the profound changes that would be that I would be going through for the next few years. Even though I got back and I went to Iraq, and it's just it wasn't like I got back and I had to live with it for a normal life. I just got back and I deployed again, and then I got back and I deployed again. And, it wasn't something I necessarily even had time to process consciously. I definitely processed it subconsciously. It was there. So.
Well, and speaking of Haiti, if you recall, on a humanitarian effort like this, what are the rules of engagement for the boots on the ground, if there are even rules of engagement?
There were rules of engagement. I mean, we always, every Marine or rifleman, every situation is a combat situation. That's just how we see it. Even the humanitarian, we were all on point. We all had security. We had a perimeter. We knew what was going on within that perimeter and just outside of it. So it was not like we were just, letting our guard down and just.
Right.
You can see that photo that you pulled up a second ago. Those guys are condition one. They
Yep.
all have their SAPI plates in. While they don't have their helmets on, their helmets are on their back. Um, our rules of engagement were shot. We had to be shot at, and you have to see them shoot at you. Pointing weapons, they pointed so many. I mean, they pointed everything at us, and it's not like they had great weapons anyway. After the firefights we would be in, we'd gather the weapons and everything, and it'd be like little Mat 10 with like a hole rusted in the barrel. You know what I'm saying? It's just like this. What even is this? Why are they even trying with this crap? It's where do they even get this stuff? They had Uzis and all kinds of weird stuff down there. Um, yeah. So as far as rules of engagement goes, it was a lot more strict because it was a humanitarian mission, and we were trying to make it as short as possible so that the UN could take over. And it was the UN, to my understanding, the UN advisors, they came in and they were waiting until it was stable enough. And it was our job to get it stable to where the UN advisors would be like, hey, and it was it was unstable for a little while. It was about 3 months in. That's when things really calmed down. And I think they just waited for us to leave. I think, honestly, that's what happened. Every 10 years, the Marine Corps goes to Haiti. We were there in 94. We were there in 84. We were there in 2014. Like every 10 years, we're in these places. So it's, I think a lot of them just learn to just wait until the Marines leave and then do whatever they need to do a little more quiet, like just a little more under the radar.
Well, and building off of that, especially for the experience that you mentioned earlier with deployment wise, you come back from Haiti and then you get deployed again, no time to process. So by the time that you came back to Lejeune. When were you getting ready and gearing up for deployment again? What's the time frame?
Um, well, I got back and I had about 6 months, and half of that was spent in the field doing training. And that's pretty much how it always is. You know, you do a deployment, you come back, and the time before you deploy again, half of that time is kind of, it's not, I don't want to say downtime. It's kind of like, it's just like daily routine work. You know, you come in, you make sure all your paperwork's done, you make sure all your Marines are taken care of, you do whatever the unit needs to be done, you clean the barracks and you go home. You know, I mean, it's whatever busy work you have to do. And then 6 months, or let's say 6 months. I'm kind of on the MU schedule right now. The MU is a good example because we would do 7 months of deployment, and then we'd get back and have 6 months of downtime where we're just kind of going through office work daily, you know, hours. And then we would do 6 months of what we called workups, which is just vigorous training where I mean, we're constantly either on ship or in the field and getting ready for the 7 month deployment. And that's the rotation. Pretty much every unit, especially during OIF and OEF, had these rotations. The Muse around 2009, they pulled the Muse out of the Iraq and Afghanistan rotation because they, you know, they're the expeditionary force that's supposed to be floating in the ocean just in case something happens. And they were all tied up in Iraq and Afghanistan, so they kind of pulled them out. But the rotation stayed the same. Rotation is the same for divisions and RCTs, the combat regimental combat teams, battalions, BLTs. So they all have a rotation. So our my downtime between Haiti and Iraq was half of it was just me blowing my money. I was I was I got in some trouble. I got NJP'd at that time. For this, I think I mentioned the speeding ticket. Did I go?
Hmm.
Oh my God, I get heated talking about the speeding ticket, but because I really did get thrown under the bus, and I hope that that gentleman of a staff sergeant sees me saying this sometime because man, he really screwed me there. But I uh, I was chasing adrenaline most of the time. I had motorcycles, I had sports cars. You know, that's what I spent my money on. You know, like, and I just wanted to go fast. I had a little GSXR that I bought off another Marine. And I mean, I was going like 150 miles an hour on that thing outside of Lejeune on the 24. Like, yeah, I mean, it's a really straight, flat
Yep.
highway. If you're going by Piney Green, like by the main gate to Piney Green, that whole stretch, it's just flat. You know, I mean, I can't believe I was doing that. It gets scary to think back on it, man. But I mean, it's not like I was weaving in and out of cars. There was no one on the road. That doesn't make it any better. Um, I was just endangering myself. But yeah, I was just chasing adrenaline. You know, after seeing everything I saw in Haiti and after doing everything, it's just I didn't know that's what I was doing. Anyway, I got in a lot of trouble because I got I got I got my good conduct medal because I was in for 3 years without getting in trouble. I got my good conduct medal 2 days before my NJP. So I actually got the medal. And because it's every 3 years, it's not like like I was delayed from my second one. It was delayed by 2 days. So I just had wait another 3 years and 2 days to get my next one. So it was like, it didn't really affect my medals or you know, it was just kind of a shameful thing because I was non-rect for I mean for a long time. It's something stupid. And then you know I had all kinds of other punishments. But anyway, that's what I was doing in the downtime. If I wasn't in the field, I was being an idiot. A lot of people, a lot of my fellow Marines will tell you, like I was really knowledgeable. I was in great shape. I had a good PFT score. I was good with a rifle, and I was really good with a camera. But man, I was kind of nuts. Like it's not. I'm not saying the Marine Corps made me that way. I was just this little wild Carolina boy, and you know, I just didn't. I didn't know what was proper. And on top of that, I was kind of I was going through everything that every other American was going through after 9/11. You know, we were so unsure of what everything was going on, and we wanted to hate somebody, as Americans do. You know, we just didn't know who the hell to hate, and I kind of figured out later that I was hating the wrong people, but it's I mean, hell, the wrong people are the right people, and the right people are the wrong.
Man,
It was just it was a weird time. it was really volatile. Anyway,
I just want you to know that I'm going to show that segment of what you just said there about 9/11 in about a week and a half when I'm teaching it in my classroom that day. So there you go. Some 90 students are going to hear that statement because I don't know a better way to explain it. I remember that from my childhood, dude. But uh, you know, building up to that next deployment, and you mentioned the adrenaline rush and chasing that, and I think the other GWAT guys I've talked to that did their time in the court, all of them have said something of that nature whenever they came back from that first
you
deployment
see
and seeing
this,
things
right,
that
man?
first time.
Motorcycles,
Oh yeah.
sports car. I mean, hell, I'm still there, man. I'm not any better.
Hopefully not doing 150 these days, but hey,
Definitely
man.
not. I got things to live for now, man.
So with this next deployment that does, end up coming around, at this point you've had plenty of experience as a photographer with the photographs that you have taken of training exercises of Haiti. Do you get to keep any of the originals? Do you get to keep that film, or is all of it immediately sent somewhere else and you get a hold of it later?
So the bummer about combat camera in my time versus the Vietnam guys is they shot film. When I first came in the Marine Corps, everything was still film. I still shot Nikon. Everything was, we had a black, I mean, we had our dark room, we had our overheads, we had everything, all of our enlargers. We had a big Noritsu film processing machine in every combat camera. Like it was all there when I got in, but it was quickly phased out. And we ended up getting, we went Canon when we went digital because, a little photography tidbit. I've always been a Nikon guy. The edge to edge clarity and the Carl Zeiss lenses that Nikon used back in the day, because their modern stuff I can't really speak to it, but the edge to edge clarity in the old Nikon lenses was like spot on. And while I would use Canons, it always had a vignette around my photo, like I could see a dark ring around all of my. It was weird that Canon did that, but Canon's digital processors for their cameras were way better than anything Nikon was putting out, and Kodak as well. Kodak was a good runner there for a couple years, but they fell out of the rain. But yeah, Canon, they make really great cameras, and that's what we shot. So all that to say, um, when I was in Iwakuni is when I made the transition to shooting only digital. And when you shoot only digital, it's a lot harder to hold on to what you have. Various thing. There's a lot of factors there to like retaining these photos. Is first and foremost, everything I shot was classified, so it had to go to a releasing authority before it went out. So that photo you pulled up a little bit ago, that photo would have gone to probably the public affairs officer, the XO, or the operations officer. One of those three people would have cleared that photo and said this photo is okay for civilian, distribution or viewing or whatever. And then most of it goes to AP, but they, sorry, I kind of lost train of thought there. What was I saying?
Well, going to the holding on to the photographs there, and
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yep.
So that kind of the chain of custody was a really strange thing because a lot of my photos, as soon as I would archive them, they would be in a shared hard drive within Combat Camera that was classified whatever range. Um, and I wasn't really allowed to keep a lot of the stuff. Now I've seen a lot of my stuff. We had what was called JCCC back in the day. It's something else now, and it's not set up as easily that I can tell. But Joint Combat Camera Center was ran out of Quantico, and you could go to their website and actually type your information and see all of your photos that have been submitted and cleared, anything that you've put out. So I could actually go there and see all of my photos from Haiti, all of my stuff that I'd ever submitted to JCCC, and which was most of my stuff that was cleared. And aside from that, it's whatever I could keep on a hard drive or a thumb drive. And I don't know about you, man, but if you try to think of all the hard drives and thumb drives that you've ever had, think about since 2003, how many thumb drives you've had. And
Ooh.
this is like 2003 is back when like a 500 megabyte thumb drive was this big thing. You know what I'm saying? We were just like, whoa, this is 216K, man. This is huge. So I mean, you couldn't have much on there. And then the biggest external hard drives were only like, 500 megs when I first started buying them. And I thought it was amazing when I first got a gig. A gig, I didn't have a gig until like 2007 or something like that.
Man, dude.
Yeah. So
Talking our
having
age
all of
now.
these
Shoo.
having all of these thumb drives, having all of these hard drives, they either get lost, they'd stop working. This is 250 gigs. Look at this thing. It has external power source. It has the old school USB. Like you don't even see
Yep.
the. I don't even have the cables for it, but it stopped working. I need to take it because it's an old spin hard drive and take it and put it into another case to see if I can get it to work. But this is what I'm saying. So I have photos. They're just on non-working hard drives. So it's hard to keep up with that stuff. Whatever's not on the internet, it's kind of like, ugh. And I know a lot of guys are better about keeping that stuff. I was I was I was an anti-photographer. It was strange for me because like I love photography. I still love photography. But I also liked living in the moment. And I think too many people kind of put their face behind the camera, and then when they see somebody else's face behind the camera they take their time because it's like, oh, put me in front of the camera. It's just, why don't we all just enjoy this moment, so anyway, um I I wasn't as proactive as I should have been about gathering and saving a lot of my photos. But I can go online and see a ton of my stuff. Like I go on there now. It kind of sucks. I'm not going to tell you my codes because people go looking it up. I'll tell
Mm-hmm.
you when it's not recording. I don't mind doing that.
Got you.
But if I tell you my what we call the VIRN, it's our identification number for our photos that we would put in there that identifies it as my photo. It comes up with some grody stuff. I mean, it's not pretty. It's not like you're gonna see a bunch of like glorious combat like scenes from Call of Duty. It just doesn't exist. It's like it's it's a bunch of ugly Marines covered in filth, like doing filthy things. That's what it is. That's the entire nature of it. And why would I want to keep that crap? You know what I'm
Understand.
saying?
Understand.
If I type that stuff into the internet, sometimes it'll pop up and I'll see some happy stuff. It's be like, oh, hey, I remember that patrol you popped up a second ago. I remember we went to the market and I ended up buying a bunch of bananas. They were completely rotten, but I gave the lady $3 for it and she acted like she won the lottery. I don't know what the translation is from $3 to 2004 Haiti dollars, but it's probably a lot. Anyway, I didn't eat those fucking bananas. They were gross. I think they were plantains actually, but anyway, I so no, I don't have a lot. I do have some. I have some on my computer, and I have some of me and my friends. Like that take more photos of your boys thing. We were combat cameramen. We took photos of ourselves. Like we took photos of each other. I have photos of me on combat patrols. I think if you looked at my Reddit, you see
Oh
the one
yeah.
in the slingshot. Yeah,
Dude,
yeah,
man.
that was on a patrol. Like those kids had been following us the whole time, and they would throw rocks and they'd punk off my helmet. And that's what they love. They love hearing it because they make that knock, And as soon as they'd hear that punk, they would start giggling and so I'd pew, and I wouldn't aim at them. I'd aim off to the left, and this rock would pew. It was crazy. It was stuff we would do in the South growing up.
Oh
These
man.
little Iraqi kids were little hillbillies. I swear they were. Anyway, um, so I have photos of me, and I have some of the photos of some of the stuff that I did, but most of it, no. It's not something I want to hold on to. I've always been a photographer in the artistic sense, and doing combat photography kind of ruined photography as an art for me. It's to the point where I'll take photos with my phone, but you're not going to see me out there with my. I have a really nice SLR. Like I have lenses. I've not worked as a photographer since. I will
Man.
not work as a photographer since. It's just not something I'm willing to do. It really burned me out with it, and it's yeah. I'm
So
sure a
that
lot of guys, they probably learned from it and they moved on and they shot everything from Maplethorpe to Eggleston and they're happy and they're going for it. But that's just not me, man. It really killed it for me. And to the point where like when I was at Wounded Warriors, jumping forward a little bit, when I was at Wounded Warrior Battalion before I retired, they had a a little photography club, and I joined it, and I went, man, and I went once, and it was just like, I can't, just putting the camera to my face. It just felt weird. It was too soon. It was too soon. Anyway,
Well,
long answer to your question. I don't have a lot of my photos, but I have some.
man, don't complain about long answers, dude. That's what I'm here for. That statement though, about your passion for photography pre-Marine Corps, that's going to come back to fruition at the very whenever we get towards the end of our interview series, which I don't anticipate happening for a minute, but that will come back up. But thinking about the restrictions as well, I know talking to my Vietnam combat photography veterans, we had a segment where they told me that they went through essentially a training period before they went to Vietnam of the do's and don'ts of what to photograph in country and what not to photograph.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have to go through that for each deployment, or was it pretty much the same for each deployment, your time in the Marine Corps, of what to photograph and what not to photograph?
So no one ever really gave me that speech. No one, if they did, I wasn't listening. I took photos of anything and everything that I possibly wanted. And my justification was, and I meant, I'll tell you, I ran into some friction because of it too. Um, the, uh, the, my justification was everything that I photographed was classified. Nothing that I'm not media. I'm not a journalist. I'm not for shooting for stars and stripes. Like nothing that I'm taking these photographs is for anything other than intelligence, reconnaissance, historical documentation, and everything is classified. So I would be I would be forward, and we would take an HVT. We'd take a high value target, detain them, and I would have to take photos of them. So I would go in and they're called something else now. The HET team, HET, the Human Exploitations team. They got a fancier name now because human exploitations just sound terrible. Like, why would you want to, why would you name it that? That's so. Anyway, they have a much fancier name that just sounds friendly, like the human, we're your buddy team. Um, but they're essentially interrogators. They're not interrogators in that you think like they're out there torturing people necessarily. They're like kind of like military or like kind of like a police detective. They know how to question people. They know what things to say. They know how to call bluffs. I'm not going to go into them, but those guys hate having their photos taken and they will fight you. I'm not kidding. Like they're just like, don't take my photograph. You can't take my photograph. You will not take my photograph. And they're just like, I got this from Recon guys sometimes, and then eventually MARSOC guys. And my response every single time was the same thing. Click. What are you going to do about it? Like, what, seriously, what are you going to do about it? If I send this photo to the S2, they're going to be like, oh, look who it is. Our guy who is in the S2, who we know. We don't want to publish this. Delete. There's a lot of, anyway, yeah, sorry. I know I went on this little tangent there, but I
No,
ran
dude.
into that a lot. A lot of people telling me not to take their photo, and I took photos of anything and everything. No one ever told me not to take photos, and if they did, I argued with them. I remember I was a lance corporal arguing with staff sergeant one time, and it was a recon staff sergeant. No, no, I'm sorry, it was a radio recon staff sergeant. Big difference. Don't tell them that. Um, it was a radio recon staff sergeant. He was like, "Don't take my photo," and I was like, "I'll take your photo if I fucking want to, man." And he did not want to hear that. So this was actually at range 32. So I was a lance corporal cussing out this staff sergeant in the shadow of the Reaper. Like I think the Lance Corporal Underground would have praised me. They would have absolutely loved that happened. But I digress. No, if they told me not to take photos of it, I didn't listen. I don't remember them saying no, don't take photos of that, Kevin or McCall. Um, yeah, and if they did, I ignored them wholly. Yeah, like fuck that. My job wasn't just to do intelligence and reconnaissance. The historical documentation, like it's such an important aspect of being an American, being a constitutionalist, being someone who believes in accountability. If someone had broken the law if a Marine had broken the law and I had been there and documented it, my photos would have been evidence. So I have never tampered with evidence, but it is up to me whether I have that evidence or not. You know what I mean?
I get what you're saying.
They don't teach us that. They will never teach us that. But it's it's really up to the photographer. You know, I there was a lot of guys who would put their cameras behind their backs, and there's a lot of guys who would snap away. I was a snap away guy. I would take photos, like I said, of anything and everything, and I submitted. If it happened, I'm proud of it. You know, if you did it, you should be proud of it. Like this, you made the best decision in the moment. You like with the opportunity and the choices given to you. Like we did what we did. So I never burned anybody and I never fried anybody, but nobody ever gave me a reason to. So
Well,
uh,
hopefully this is gonna be a funny question to ask here for you. Did you ever have in your deployments in the various units you went, did you ever have that guy that was the annoying guy that was like, take my picture of like everything, of like, hey, take my picture, like always there?
yeah. Um, I had a couple of those types of guys. There were the annoying guys who always wanted their photos taken, and they would try to be as photogenic as possible. And they were always like, they would pose for me. They would get like in my line of sight and pose for me and just sit there, like looking like they're in the like some deep thought. You know, I don't know, man. You know, typically I avoided those guys. Like I like taking not because not only because I'm petty and I don't want anything to do with them, but because I like natural photos. If I'm taking photos of Marines on patrol, like the one you saw, those guys aren't staged. There's no fluff about that photo. The composition's not even good. I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I took that. But the information is there. That is historical documentation. That's the difference between the art and the documentation. There's no art to that. It is what it is. It's fact. It's what you can see. It is there. That was my job. And I was really freaking good at it. So yeah.
Well, I mean, like, and I know this is going off track, and anybody who's watching this and is going to complain about it, oh, well, I don't care. That's one of the things I appreciate about the Marine Corps is the documentation aspect, because, for your time in the Corps from '02 to, like you said, what, 2011, if I'm not mistaken. Um,
December of 11. Yeah.
you're the legacy of World War II Marine combat photographers. Like that is the legacy that we see happening there. And since combat photography was realistically used and spearheaded by the Corps, you see that. And that is what you are living up to, good or bad, like you say. If you
Yeah.
took it, be proud of it, own it. But also at the same time, I know a lot of the Vietnam guys I've been fortunate to talk to, they mentioned, like being a combat photographer, people think that's all you do is photograph combat. You photograph any and everything. The funny
Everything.
things, odd things that you see out there on patrol, the local life, just things that you
Yeah.
find unique.
My buddy, he uploaded to JCCC, like I was saying, a picture of me completely naked. From behind, and I'm turned around looking at him doing. We wanted to just see if we could, so it's there. It's in the National Archives.
That is awesome that it's in the archives, dude. I mean, that means that hopefully in like 40 years, if I'm ever in the archives, I can pull this file if I get clearance. That's incredible.
Well, okay, so when I first got to Lejeune, I was there for like a week or two weeks, 3 weeks before I went to Bridgeport, and they gave me some busy work because I was going to be leaving soon. And they didn't want me to kind of get settled, and I had to go clean out the dark room because they had already switched completely over to digital by this point. So they sent me into the dark room, and I was able to take some studio lights in there, and I set them up because there weren't lights in there. I mean, there was a red light, but didn't really. I mean, it was so dim you couldn't really see shit. So I took these big white studio lights in there, and I set them up, and I flicked them on, and it was. I mean, it was a actually a pretty nice dark room. But in the corner was this old rickety just utility shelf, and it was just full of negatives. I mean, full of negatives from all the way back to like 1982.
Whoa.
It was just, I mean, just stacks and boxes and just tons of negatives from combat photographers. And it's not all combat. It's whoever that photographer was, whatever they wanted to take photos of while they were on patrol, while they were in Grenada, whenever they were on the flight line in whatever country, while they were in freaking Lebanon, while they were, I mean, there were photos from all over the places that combat photographers had gotten attached to, whether it was a wing unit, an amphibious unit, or a ground unit, and they had been sent there with them, and they just took photos of not just the training, not just the unit, but the people while they were all sitting around smoking and playing poker, like while they were all drinking out at the bars, while they were doing all of this stuff. And it was so inspirational to me and really taught me more than anything how to be a combat photographer because I saw that we're just people, this is what it is. That's what it is. And that's what that's what I can add to the Marine Corps' legacy. That's how I can contribute to it, is putting my own flavor of documentation into it. So a naked photo of me, I mean, that's just par for the course. It
So,
makes perfect sense that it would be there.
man, if you ever write the book, which we talked about the other day, dude, that should be the front cover of the book. Maybe like blur out what's necessary and, the life of one Marine or the legacy of one Marine. That's a hell of a book cover right there.
It was
That's
taken in Kuwait too.
and that sells. You know what they say? Sex sells. Like that right there. Boom. Instant bestseller in New York Times, man. But the flare part is a great way to explain the photography aspect because, like I teach high school kids. I talk to people, about my passion for Marine Corps history and what I do, and they're like, "Oh, jarheads, grunts, 0311s, crayon eaters." And I'm like, "No, these are some of the smartest, most brilliant people I've ever talked to in my entire life." Like, yes, did they do stupid things? Of course, but you don't understand the brilliance of some of the individuals I've talked to. And I like that you bring that flair aspect, is that each Marine that was a combat photographer, their viewpoint through that lens is going to be different at times of what they're photographing, their interest, their take, like you said, the art versus the documentation. I think that's the wonder of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely is. And that art is all of the nonsense photos you find in between. It really is. Whenever I was, as I was saying about kind of the job evolving over time from the guys shooting film to us shooting digital, because I shot digital, like they would have their camera kit and a bunch of film, and probably a couple replacement lenses. I figured like a camera repair kit, and maybe a couple other things. But I carried some shit. Like I carried shit. I had two cameras. This is what I had on me on a combat patrol. So I had my regular combat load. I had a rifle. I had an M16,
Okay,
and
so how much ammo for the M16 as a combat photographer? How many bandoliers, magazines?
I had 8 magazines of 28. And that was because when I was with 3-8, you would have 6 magazines on the front and two on the back. On your back, you would put a magazine holder on your back for the guy behind you. It was just something their unit did, and it's something I picked up. I ended up moving it to the front eventually, but I carried eight magazines of 28 rounds for my M16, and then I carried an M9 also, Beretta M9, and I had I think like 4 magazines for it, and so I was already carrying a shitload of ammunition for 2 weapons. On top of that, I had a Panasonic Toughbook, which was probably like 10 pounds itself with spare batteries. I had the charger for it and all the cables for it. On top of that, I had what was called an RBGAN satellite, RBGAN. And it's kind of like, it looked like a laptop, and it unfolds and you just point it south and hook all the wires up, and it had batteries that went with it. On top of that, I had 2 camera bodies. I had a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. I had a double spacer for it. I had a 70 to 150. I had a 50 millimeter lens, and I carried a fisheye just because why not? And that was my personal thing in my bag though. And then I had all the batteries for it. Because we would cross train, I also had a video camera on me. It was usually like a PD 175 or a PD 150 video camera, one of the big gray ones with the boom mic on the top, plus all the batteries for it. So I had batteries for this camera and the camera, batteries for this camera, 2 cameras, all the lenses, a satellite, a computer, all of the cables for that, my food, my water, my flak jacket, my helmet, eight magazines of M16 rounds, my M16, my pistol, um, 4 magazines of that, and then all of the whatever personal crap that I wanted. Like I had a little Velcro pouch. I kept like a Bible and some photos, and in my cargo pocket.
Dude, so how much, so as a combat photographer, just on, for example, what you're mentioning there, how much weight are we looking at with your body weight and everything you're carrying?
Well, I was a skinny little thing, so I was like 150 pounds. But I mean, I probably had shit. Just the combat load was probably another 60 to 70 pounds. Um, the flak jacket, the weapons, and the ammunition. And then just computer equipment, probably another 40 pounds. With the camera equipment, probably another 40 or 50 pounds. So I
Damn.
mean, I had like 200 pounds on me, and that's what I humped with. That's what I walked across Iraq with. And I say I walked across Iraq because I walked across Iraq. We did Operation River Sweep 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, where we walked to the Euphrates with metal detectors, finding caches of buried bombs, buried weapons, and we blow them up in place. So I've walked across that fucking country, man, and I carried every bit of that with me. I have no idea how I did that. I'm 41 now. I look back on it, it's like, Jesus, how did 21-year-old Kevin do that? I have no idea. It had to have been I mean, that hillbilly strength that I was just
Man, that hillbilly
eating
strength is something.
that pimento cheese and that potted meat. Got
Man, dude, that pot of meat
me.
carried you through some weight. So it's like, this is one of my favorite questions, as you'll know. I have a lot of favorite questions. That's a interesting statement there, but this is one I really enjoyed asking the Vietnam guys is their cameras, were they provided by the Marine Corps or personal? Same thing for you. Were your cameras, batteries provided by the Marine Corps, or did you have to purchase these yourself?
Everything was provided by the Marine Corps, and everything I had to give back to the Marine Corps. There's a saying in the Marine Corps: "Gear adrift is a gift." I'm sure you've heard that.
I have.
If you don't sign for it, you keep it. I'm just saying. There was a I was in during a really interesting time too, where I didn't have to abuse anything because we transitioned from film to digital while I was in the Marine Corps. We had to empty all of our film stores. Like we had supply cabinets from 80 years of just film cameras. We had old Pentax and old medium format Minoltas and Mamiyas, and
Don't tell
these
me this was
cameras
at
were.
Lejeune that y'all are emptying this out at.
It was, huh?
Was this at Lejeune? Y'all were
It
emptying
was
this out?
everywhere,
Oh
every base,
no.
and a lot of it went to Dermo, and you could buy it from the Dermo auction. So I bought shitloads of stuff from Dermo for pennies. So I got like a film drying cabinet for, I think I paid 20 cents, 22 cents for it. I bought a box of lenses for like $22, and I sold them for like 700. It was insane, and all of it's legal, so I didn't break any laws with this. So I was just in at the right time, because we had to liquidate all that crap and replace every bit of it. But when I got to Lejeune, when I was in Iwakuni, it was a lot different because we were still in that transitional period. But when I got to Lejeune, I was issued a Pelican case. It was no joke, about probably about this wide, about this tall, and about that deep. Um, so probably about 3 feet wide, about 2 feet, and then about a foot to a foot and a half thick. And if you pop that sucker open, it had everything I just explained in it. It had two camera bodies. It was the Canon 20Ds, D20s. Well, I can't remember what they were, but there was something like that. And then, and this was in 2004. So whatever was brand new. They were brand spanking new. George Bush had just dumped money on the Marine Corps. I got this brand new camera kit. It had two brand new camera bodies, the big lenses, all kinds of CF cards, tons of batteries, chargers. I got brand new camera bag that was made by a T-File, a really nice one. They gave us a lot of really cool stuff. I also got a brand new M16A4. It When they issued it I had to go to the armory and sign for it. They were like, "Hey, come give me your weapons card for your A2, and we'll give you an A4." They gave it to me, and they were like, "You have to clean it. You have to do an initial clean." I was like, "The fuck? It's coming from the factory, right?" And they were like, "Yeah." So they handed it to me. It was in a box. I had to unbox it, unwrap it, and wipe all the packing grease off of it. It had had 5 rounds through it in the factory, and that was it. Brand new rifle. It was so beautiful. It was, you know, I didn't really like George W. Bush, but in that moment, I was really happy with him because as a Marine, I had this beautiful weapon. Like it was a work of art, man. It was just a gorgeous rifle. Anyway, I got that, and I got a new camera kit, new gear. They gave us new holsters, new knee pads and elbow pads, all this shit we didn't really use. I mean, I never wore any of that crap, but they gave us a bunch of stuff. They dumped a lot of money in the Marine Corps between 2002 and 2005. I never knew anyone that used their own personal camera equipment. Now, I know a lot of us carried our own personal cameras. Like I had a little Canon point and shoot that I would keep in my pocket because I've had my camera, my issued camera go down, and I've had the backup go down as well, especially in the desert. You don't think, you know, I'm sure you've heard from, actually, yeah, you probably have thought about it because you've talked to other combat cameramen. But one of our biggest enemies isn't the enemy, it's the elements. I was in a desert with camera gear. You know what I'm saying? Like sand gets everywhere.
Everywhere.
And you've seen the big storms come through, dude. I was in those all the time where it's like thousands of feet tall, just wave of sand coming, and you can't see anything for 2 days because everything's red. And by the end of it, it's just like my camera gear is just shot. If I dared turn on autofocus, and I would just depress the button to engage the autofocus, I would hear because it was just having to battle that stuff. So we got to the point where we would wrap most of our camera equipment in burlap because it would kind of act as a filter and keep it out of the creases. But that only worked so well. I mean, and we had to interchange our lenses so often that it kind of interfered with all of it. But yeah, the elements were a big issue. I never would have wanted to take equipment that I owned into that environment. I just wouldn't want to. And I see, when I was forward, I would see a lot of the freelance photographers and the photojournalists, the civilian photojournalists come through, and I'd see the equipment that they would carry, and it was way more expensive than the stuff I was issued. And I often wondered, like, if it was theirs or if it was. I guess the freelance guys, it was obviously theirs, but the guys that worked for the studios, I never knew if it was theirs or the studios. But I would see that stuff get used and abused, and it was really kind of sad to put camera equipment through it. But yeah, as far as I never had my own stuff. I had my own little point and shoot that I took out there with me. I made a bunch of videos with a friend of mine on it. We had this band that we made up called Blood Through the Window. It was a death metal band, and I was playing guitar on a broom, and he was singing into a pistol like that was his microphone. And I mean, they were actually pretty good.
That
If
goes
I showed
hard.
it to you, you'd be like, "This is stupid as hell," but it's kind of funny.
Nah, man, you post that on Reddit or something. You got some Marines that are gonna just immediately go. That's the hardest thing they've ever seen, man. Well, and with all that equipment being brought together now and having an idea of what you're carrying, and with that first deployment, now we're leading into the second deployment with all of this. Did you know that you were going to go on that second deployment when you got back to Lejeune after Haiti, or was it sometime later you got notified that you were going to go back out?
I knew that I was going to Iraq eventually. I mean, the moment I got to Lejeune, they told me they were like, "You're going to go to Afghanistan or Iraq or both." A lot of guys went to both. I never got to go to Afghanistan. I really wanted to, only in that I wanted, being from the mountains, I wanted to go see the Hindu Kush. I want to go see, I really wanted to see the mountains. I went to I hate to say this because I don't mean to insult anyone, but I went to shitholes when I went to war. You know what I mean? I didn't go to nice places. I didn't go see the better parts of the world. I would have loved to at least see the Hindu Kush. I would have loved to pass through the same valleys that Alexander the Great, went through. It would just been the most rad thing you think of for me. But I went to Mesopotamia, or the remnants of, and saw nothing. There was, I saw a couple ruins, which were thousands of years old, obviously, but nothing really
The roots of human
worthwhile. Then I
history.
went to Haiti and saw the remnants of France's destruction, and then, American sugar production. That's that's what I saw. So I Yeah. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Man, don't apologize, Kevin. Dude, talk, dude. You got it. You're killing it. But going to Iraq and you get the notification. Did you know what unit you were going to be with, or is that something you found out once you got in country?
So all of that stuff. I mean, kind of an insight to a combat camera shop. Division Combat Camera has a warrant officer. There's no officers within Combat Camera. We don't have officers in Marine Corps Combat Camera. We have warrant officers and enlisted, and that's it. Um, which is why there's no clearing authority within Combat Camera. There's no combat cameraman with clearing authority. So none of them can unclassify my photos, period. Only officers can do that. You have to be an officer to obtain clearing authority. So when you're looking at a combat camera, you have the warrant officer, the operations chief, the photo staff NCO, the video staff NCO, the repro staff NCO, and then below, a sergeant below underneath that, and so when they split us for our division deployment, what they did is our gunnery sergeant, the ops chief, he went to Camp Blue Diamond, Ramadi. That's Camp Blue Diamond's Ramadi. Yeah, that's he went there. I was in Al Anbar, so I didn't go that way. But he was in Camp Blue Diamond with the warrant officer and division headquarters. Division headquarters stayed there. They stayed with our higher ups stayed with division headquarters. The photo chief, the staff sergeant from photo, he took four of us and went to RCT 2, so Second Marines, and that's where I went. And then the video chief, a staff sergeant, he went to Fallujah. They went to RCT 7, RCT something. No, it wasn't RCT 7. I can't remember. I can't remember who they were. It was someone out of Lejeune. That's why I know it wasn't Seventh Marines. But anyway, they went to Fallujah and they had their whole AO down there, and we had all of Al Anbar, so we had the largest AO. And I was there with another Marine who I had been to Haiti with. I was in Haiti for 4.5 months. He showed up at about like a month and a half, 2 months into it. And he was my video. He was a videographer, and I was the photographer, and we worked great together. He was I mean, we had a lot of friction because we're not like, people don't always get along, but he and I worked great together. As far as a combat camera team, we did a lot of aerial reconnaissance, a lot of anyway, we did great together. And he was on my RCT 2 team with me, and it was me and him, and then two guys who were boots at the time, but they ended up being great Marines once they got into the fleet, and they actually deployed. And one of them, I just went to his retirement last February. I flew back to Lejeune and I went to his retirement at Camp Johnson. Yeah, he was a first sergeant. He got all the way to first sergeant and retired.
Man,
Yeah, and he and his family, they're living the life now out in Tennessee. They went home, he's got this ranch and he's got his kids and living the life. But this guy I used to, drink whiskey with, and we used to talk about all kinds of dirty stuff together. It's really funny to see him. The other guy is an instructor at the schoolhouse. He teaches my MOS now. Yeah, which is the coolest thing. He's a civilian instructor for combat photographers. Really, just an amazing turnaround. And the other guy, he owns. Last time I talked to him, he owns a small business in Connecticut, and he's doing great. He has kids, and he's married and happy,
right
and doing
on,
really
man.
well for himself. But yeah, they split us four with the photo staff sergeant, and we went, to Al Anbar, and we went to Al Assad, and we split out from there. And because Al Anbar was so large, um, we rarely saw each other. If we were in a smaller AO, we would be able to pair up and go on operations together. But because it was such a huge place and there were operations going on hundreds of miles away from each other, we rarely saw each other. It was kind of a lonely job at that point. But I did know that I was going with a unit. I didn't know where I was going necessarily yet. I found out that I was going to Iraq first. They were like, "Hey, you're going to Iraq for sure." That was probably around 2 months before we went. I found out what unit I was going to be with about 1 month before I went, and I did the fleet assistance program. I fapped over to them. That word has completely different meaning these days, so it's weird to say it. But back then it was normal vocabulary. I mean, it wasn't weird. So I fapped over there, and I swapped over to that unit, and we deployed out a couple months later. I didn't know where we were going until probably 2 weeks before we left. I didn't know what AO we were going to be. And it's all operational security. I had a really high clearance because of my job. I had a TSCI, which is really high. It's expired now since, but it was a really high clearance, and I got to go into some pretty sensitive briefings that were time sensitive. Now they would mean nothing, but at the time, I was still kept in the dark. That's how secretive everything was. We really didn't know where we were going or when we were going to be there, and they keep us in the dark purposefully. It's all operational security. So I just knew I was going to be in that country, and then I found out I was going to be in Al Anbar. I was going to Al Assad probably a week before we went.
So for you and your journey to Al Asad, how did you end up getting there step by step? Of course, obviously the first one's going to be a flight, but where from and where did that flight journey take you?
So for us, we went same as when I went to Haiti. I went to Cherry Point, got on a C5 and went straight to Haiti. And then when I went to Iraq, I got to Cherry Point. I flew I flew on a commercial. We had chartered we had contracted a ton of commercial jets. So we were getting on commercial planes, like 757s and stuff like that. And they like had the entire flight crew from like Delta or whatever, and the stewardesses. I mean, the flight attendants were there and everything. It was just like a normal flight, but a bunch of stinky Marines getting on, and we all had weapons and stuff. It's like it's weird. You don't see that, but so we went to Cherry Point. I think we flew from Cherry Point to a civilian airport and then transferred over to a civilian aircraft. So we probably flew like a C5 to somewhere. Anyway, so we left the United States, and I know for a fact we went to Shannon, Ireland. And then we flew from Shannon, Ireland to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt to Kuwait. And Kuwait, there were two main hubs in Kuwait. There was Camp Buring and Camp whatever the hell it was called, Ali Salim. Can't believe I remembered that. I went through both of them at different times. You usually went to Ali Salim, I think, if you were going to Afghanistan, and you went to Camp Buring if you were going to Iraq. I might have that backwards, though. Again, it's been like 20 years. So I went through them both at different times, but we landed our commercial jet in Kuwait. We stayed in Camp Buring that time, my first time through, because I went again later on. And then we hung out there until we ended up getting on C-130s and rode from Kuwait City or Camp Buring, I'm sorry, not Kuwait City, Camp Buring to Takadam, Iraq. And once we got to Takadam, they split us up. So you either took a convoy because we had to take our vehicles and a lot of equipment up. We don't just have vehicles, we have equipment and workstations and bays and all kinds of crap that we have to tow with trucks. So like we have, I'll get into that later. We had to take a bunch of stuff up. So a lot of us flew, a lot of us drove, a lot of us did whatever and went to different places, because we had, our RCT2, we had the entire AO of Al Anbar, which is basically Western Iraq, from Al Qaim to Ubaidi to Rutba to Hit to Al Assad. I mean, all of that was within our realm. So we had to replace everyone that was at those bases. So it was a big turnover. For me, I went to Kuwait, to Takadam, and I got on another plane that took me to Al Assad. When I got to Al Assad, I sat in receiving. You get off the plane and you sit in this little wooden building for about 2 hours. Somebody comes and tells you where your unit is supposed to be heading and where you need to stage to get to where you need to be. Al Assad Air Base was massive. I mean, massive. Like it was a huge base. And the Marine Corps, we had different stations throughout, but we were mainly a place called Camp Ripper, and it's just south of the airstrip on Al-Assad Air Base, and it's this little cordoned off Marine Corps base. And Camp Ripper had the best chow hall in Iraq. Everyone knew that. People would come from everywhere and go to our chow hall. It sucked because it was always busy. We always wanted them to go. But yeah, that's how I got there. And once I got to Al Assad, it was, I think, 10 days before I got sent out. They give you 10 days to acclimatize because it takes the human body 10 days to acclimatize to a new environment. So we stuck there and then we were pushed out from there. I went to Camp KV at Rutba first, down in southwest Iraq.
So, to backtrack just a smidge here on your flight there from Ireland to Germany to Kuwait, did you get any time to explore Ireland or Germany, or was it probably a good idea to keep Marines on the plane and not let them explore?
We were in uniform, so we were all in our camis. We all had our weapons. When we landed in Shannon, Ireland, for example, they let us off the plane, and we were all allowed to have 2 beers. You could drink, but I mean, we were, like I said, we were in our uniform. We had to leave our weapons on the plane, and we left weapons guards, like some fire watch on the weapons. So people were watching them. We went in. I was in there for maybe I think 2 hours because we had our layover and we were waiting to take off. And I drank like 3 Killians, probably 2 Guinness, and then like I had like 2 more beers. I mean, they told us to have 2 beers, and man, we were just like pounding them. So I mean, they didn't let us leave the airport, obviously, but we got to go into the terminal. We got to have a couple beers, and then when we flew through Frankfurt, Frankfurt sucks. It's like this little tiny terminal. I mean, tiny. It has a one duty free store in it, but I was lower ranked, so I couldn't afford anything in there. I wasn't going to buy a bottle of champagne. And then they had a kind of a rec room in the back with a broken pinball machine and a Pac-Man machine that would turn on, but the controls didn't work. So yeah, you couldn't do anything with it. And then there was a bunch of empty snack machines. That was it. That was all there is to it, man. Anyone that flew through that shithole knows exactly what it is. They'll tell you that I'm not lying. It sucked going there. But you could go smoke cigarettes. There was a little outside area, and that was the only saving grace because I smoked at the time and I chain smoked at the time. So I was able to go have some smokes after however many hours of flying to get there.
And then, of course, back to where we were though. I find the Shannon part interesting. 2 beer limit, and everybody's throwing it back, which I don't blame them, and I completely understand that.
We're
So,
Marines, man. We're not going to listen to
absolutely, what do you
them.
expect? And it's like so, getting to Iraq, your first day in country and acclimating. How would you describe the climate that you remember once you first stepped foot in country?
It was nighttime when I got there, and I remember seeing a guy in that little terminal building that I was talking about, the little wooden building. A guy I was in Haiti with, and he and I we chatted for a little bit, and he had been there for a couple weeks, and I was asking him all about it, and he gave me kind of the heads up. He was like, "Man, it sucks here. It's really hot." And I got there in February, so it wasn't the hottest part of the year yet, but it was still like on about 105 during the day. Coming from the south, I'd been in the South and I went to Japan and I went all over the world and then I went back to the South. I'm used to heat. It's pretty oppressive heat out there, but I'm also used to the humidity. I wasn't used to that dry heat. It didn't hit me as hard as it hit a lot of guys, but I felt it. It was dry and the sun just pulled whatever energy you had out of you. I mean, you could feel the sun just draining you constantly throughout the day. The hottest it got there while I was there was probably May and June. I think it was 130 at one point. It was terrible. And I'm the skinny little thing. I was skinnier back then, and it's I have no idea how I made it through there. I had to drink a lot of water. That was the biggest thing is we all had, Camelback wasn't really the company wasn't really a thing before OIF, OEF. Like it was a thing, it existed, but it wasn't as big as it is now. We really put them on the map because everyone had like a camelback on, and we all drank water all day, every day. I mean, we just had to. I would probably drink about 2 gallons of water for the first while I was there, and after being there for probably about 3 or 4 months, I was back to my normal like a couple canteens a day. I was acclimatized. I was used to it. I ended up being there. I was on a 14-month tour, so I had plenty of time to get used to it. Yeah.
That's an impressive tour in terms of length, and I can't wait to dive a little more into that. And then with that water situation as well, and the heat that you're dealing with, and you being of Scotch Irish ancestry, like realistically, is sunscreen something that you're having to apply pretty liberally to make sure that you keep from getting some pretty severe burns on the open skin?
You would think so, but no. I never wore any sunscreen the entire time I was there, and it's because we have our sleeves down. I wore gloves, and I had my helmet pretty much shaded my head the entire time. If I was on base and I was in the fob and I didn't have my helmet on, I had my boonie cover on, and it was adequate. It covered everything. So I never wore sunscreen. We always had sleeves down, and I covered myself as much as possible. I think my fingers and my thumbs, because I had them cut out so I could use my camera, like because you got gloves on, you can't hit the little switches and buttons and all that crap. They probably had a more tan than any other part of my body. But when you put your flak jacket on, you think it would come. It does. It comes about right here. But when you put the throat protector on, it's up here. When you put the neck protector, it's up here. And then you put your helmet on, it comes down to here. So I mean, there's not a lot exposed. Then the camis themselves are pretty thick tweed. I mean, there's a thick material, so not a lot of UV gets through it. We did pretty well keeping ourselves covered, and then yeah, yeah, I never really had sunburn or anything like that. It was hot, and I was sweating constantly, but it felt better. I was cooler with my sleeves down than I ever would have been with my sleeves up. You know what I mean? Even with the breeze hitting my skin, it would have been hotter with the sun on me.
Well, and that time frame that you're there, you've just essentially gotten to Iraq, and I know you mentioned that you're going to go with RCT2. Now, between those of you in the photo team, were you guys alternating battalions, or were you guys assigned to an individual battalion to work with?
We rotated, not in a synced way though. It wasn't like, hey, you're going to be here and then it's your turn and then it's your turn. It wasn't like that. It was whoever was available would go on whatever operation. Operations come up constantly and they're not scheduled. You know what I mean? They they'll come up spur of the moment. And an example in this, I'll kind of give you a little background of my job at the same time. One of the first big one of not only the first combat camera operations I did in Iraq, but one of the most combat camera operations I did in Iraq was with 2nd LAR in Rutba. They took myself, a radio operator, and a rifleman, and they dropped us about 2 clicks from it was a big truck stop out in the middle of nowhere. And the three of us by ourselves in the middle of Iraq just walked about 2 clicks to this truck stop. And we stopped about 100 yards out. And I took photos of entrances, exits, vantage points. And I had a little boom mic where I could record conversations from far away. And we circled the entire truck stop. With the entrance, exits, vantage points, the photos of faces, the recordings of whatever they were talking about, everything that I documented. And I had a night vision lens as well. We got, the three of us, we collected ourselves, went back, got picked up by the vehicles. I went back to the S2, gave them my photos. Within an hour, they had an operation planned based off of the intel that I had given them, which was the people talking. They had found out how many people were actually in the building. And we did an operation on it 2 hours later. So we did a raid on that truck stop 2 hours later based off of the photos I'd just taken. So these operations, they're spur of the moment. If we get intel or if we get someone that gives us a little bit of intelligence. There were a lot of people who came to us, like civilians that would come to us, and they would give us information, and we would investigate it. Regardless of whether we thought it was credible or not, we would look into it. And a lot of the times they would send me out, and I would gather intelligence on whatever tips that we would get and base an operation off of it. So there were a lot of short-term operations like that. But then if you look at the larger operations like Iron Fist and Operation River Sweep. I'm confusing Haiti with Iraq now. These really large operations that went on, we would be attached to a unit, um, typically a platoon, all the way down to a platoon level, and stay with that platoon the entire operation. It's stupid for me to be like, hey, I'm going to go with Kilo Company 3-2, and I'm going to bounce around between them to see if I can get lucky if something happens. It just makes more sense to me to go to their operations brief and say, I need to be with whoever the tip of the spear is going to be, the unit at the very front, and I'll just embed with them and stick with them the entire operation. So if they are pushing forward, I'm pushing forward. If they're on QRF, I'm on QRF with them. If they're chilling at the fob, I'm chilling at the fob. I just stick with those guys. So the larger operations, I stay with them. The smaller operations, I'm bouncing around for whoever's going, because the guys who go on the reconnaissance mission with me for the photos aren't the same guys who are going to be in the operations briefing, and they're not the same guys who are going to be on the actual raid. So I'll be with completely different people throughout the entire process.
And so thinking about that too, and I know you and I've already hammered home on that, but or hammered home on a part of that of different people. But with any of those grunts in the RCT too, did you get close with any of them? Make any friends with any of them that
Yeah,
perhaps?
I made friends
Absolutely.
with a lot of them. I mean, they were great guys. All throughout RCT too. I mean, I was there for through 2 cycles. So being on a 14-month tour, that's poke shit. Like grunts don't do that. They do 7-month pushes and that's it. A lot of them thought that they were big badasses when they'd come at me because I'm a pogue. But when I tell them, hey, I've been in country for 10 months, they would be like, oh, I just got here. I mean, I did befriend a lot of them though. I was with a lot of different units. 3-2, 2-2. I was with First Marines a couple times, and then I was with a lot of reservist units too. I was with 4th Recon. I was with 325. I was with an LAR unit. I was with a lot of different people. At the time, MARSOC didn't exist, and reconnaissance. Recon had their own photography equipment. If they needed to do something, they would handle it. But as far as aerial reconnaissance went, they didn't handle anything. So I did tons of aerial reconnaissance for Recon, and I would submit my stuff to them. So through all of these different units that I went through, especially the line companies, I would befriend tons of these guys. I think I told you last time I would go on the patrols with these guys, and when we would get back, I would sit down with them and get all the caption information and then burn them a CD. Well, during that time, I'm sitting there bullshitting with them. I mean, it wouldn't be like 10 minutes and I'm out, it would be like 2 hours. I'm sitting with these guys and we're talking, telling stories, playing cards. I'm asking them information about who's this guy. And they'll be like, oh, that's Smith. He's a dumbass from Alabama. And here's the story of his life. And, they would go on and on and on. So, further than that, just being on duty in places, being on fire watch and being on guard, being on post, if you're on 12-hour guard with somebody, like say you and I have never met in our lives, and they're like, hey, you're going to be on X post for 12 hours. You and I, by the end of that, are going to know each other so well. We're going to know everything. I'm going to know your dreams and aspirations. I'm going to know what you love and hate. I'm going to love. I mean, we would know everything about each other. So, if you can imagine how close we could get in 12 hours, just imagine, 2 months in Barwana, or a month and a half in Heat, and then the hard part of it is I would go to Al Qaim, and I would be in this huge operation with these guys, and I'd be with them for a month, and then the operation would end, and it would be time for them to rotate back and chill for a while, and I would bounce. I'd be like, well, see you guys, love you, talk to you later. And I would go to another unit and immediately on another operation. So while they would cycle back and have some sort of downtime, we just didn't. And as big as our area of operations was, we never had that downtime. I'm sure other guys were able to manage. I figured out ways to kind of skate here and there. I mean, because I was, OFP, man. I was OFP the entire time. Like it was just me and this huge AO, and I had to make. They would say, Kevin, get on this operation with this unit, and it was up to me to get there, and it could be 600 miles away, and I have to figure it out. I would ride in an army tank and then an air force helicopter and then get in with this marine corps convoy with some CLB unit, and then I mean all to get on this single operation. So all this to say, yeah, I met a lot of people and I befriended a ton of people. And I'm sure more people would recognize me than I would recognize them because I've met so many people. I'm sure I've forgotten so many.
So that segment there gives me two questions to ask you for today, and then I'll stop, asking questions and pestering you. But I know for the Vietnam guys, I know I keep bringing that up, but it's relevant. They had what they called repeat travel orders, where after an operation, no matter what it came to, if they said, hey, go out with Kilo 37 or you're going out with India 35, be there in 2 days. They had a document that they could show where they could get on any plane, any vehicle, no matter what. They could take any seat to get to where they needed to be. When you were in country, did you have any kind of pass like that that allowed you on any of these modes of transportation where nobody could deny you entry?
They would probably be, I hear a lot of things about the old core and how it used to be. And I'm like, man, I'm so jealous. They had it good back then, but they would probably be a lot more jealous of me because I didn't have anything like that. I just went wherever the hell I wanted. I mean, I was a Marine in uniform. I show up at the AgDag. I would be in, I can't even tell you. Okay, I'll give you this short and skinny story real quick. But so I was told, hey, Kevin, you need to be in hit by X date for X operation. And I was like, okay, I can do that. So I got in with this CLB unit and I found this unit. I went to their COC and I said, hey, I need to be on the list for this convoy. And they'd be like, we don't have any room for you. And the first thing I would say, because I got hit with that all the time, we don't have any room for you. I'll sit in a turret. And when you say I'll sit in a turret, that means some NCO doesn't have to sit in a turret. You know what I mean? And that means one of their Marines gets to go chill in the back of a truck. So whenever I say I'll sit in a turret, I'm in. I'm in right away. So I would be sitting on a 50 cal on a 7 ton, or I'd have a 240 on a Humvee. I'd be doing, I mean, I would do it, whatever. I don't care. Um, a lot of times I would just if I'd be on the Humvee, like if it would be like a bunch of officers in there, they'd tell me to sit down and take a nap. It just varied. Getting around was never hard, so that the AgDag at different flight lines, we would go to them and say, hey, I need to be here, and they would just let us on. So I needed to get to, I think it was Barwana, so that I could get to an AgDag and be picked up by a helicopter to get to hit. So I found there was a CLB convoy that was going to ASP Wolf. It was an ammunition supply point out in the middle of nowhere. And I got there, and then 2 days later, I was supposed to be picked up by another CLB convoy that was going to hit, and I was going to make my way there. I found a way. It was up to me to find it. I figured out all the convoys on the different MSRs, and I just kind of made it happen. I didn't have anything to show anybody. I just told them, hey, I need to get there. And I worked out some drug deal by saying, hey, I'll sit in a turret hey, I'll do this, or hey, I'll do that, or hey, I'll take a photo of you guys in front of your helicopter if you let me. And I did that before. I was flying in a CH-46 and the flight crew landed in the middle of the desert. We all got out the back. They posed in front of the helicopter. I took their photo and I emailed it to them later. That's how I got a flight one time. So, I did what I had to do to get wherever I went. About ASP Wolf, I got there and I ended up missing an operation, believe it or not, because I got to ASP Wolf and the convoy that was supposed to pick me up got hit by an IED. And they lost a few Marines. It was a big thing. But I was stuck at ASP Wolf for 2 weeks and we ran out of chow. So there was a platoon there, and that's it, a platoon of Marines and me. And the ASP, it wasn't our ammunition supply point. It was one of Saddam's. So there were bunkers, like miles of bunkers, just full of guns, ammunition, grenades, RPGs, you name it, it was out there. And we were like 2 weeks without MREs, So we were like, one MRE per 4 Marines per day. And we were drinking our non-potable, our shower water, essentially. We were having to boil it and everything. But we were out there getting piles of RPGs and shooting them with RPG. We were just we were hungry, man, but we had so much fun. So again, back to your earlier question, I made a lot of friends. Made a lot of friends. I have a lot of great photos. I had a lot of great photos of that. So it was up to me to get to where I needed to be, but it didn't always go as planned. I would get stuck places, I would get stranded, and it was all because of logistics, mostly IEDs. That was like the trademark thing for Iraq, was IEDs everywhere. The entire time I was there, hell, that's why I retired, is because of an IED. I got hit. I mean, it's just IEDs. Everything was IEDs. I saw more IEDs than I did firefights. It was just insane. They're just blowing everything up, and it makes sense. They have miles and miles of bunkers full of explosives, So why wouldn't they use it?
And we'll get to that point of IEDs, I assume in the next interview that we do, most certainly. And I'm always interested to talk to you guys who want to talk about that. But, our last question, and I'm going to pull up a photograph and we'll call it a day on this one. Since you've got out of the Corps, or even when you got back home after some of those deployments, did you ever run into any of those Marines that you've taken photographs of or that you went on operations with that recognized you and they've reached out to you?
Um, Yes and no. I've seen a couple guys in passing because I live right near Camp Pendleton. I see people in passing. I was pumping gas one day and I looked up and I saw this guy that I knew in a situation. I knew him from a combat situation, and he was looking at me. And when we locked eyes for a split second, and then I think he just instinctively looked away, and I could tell the wheels were, the gears were turning in his head. He was trying to think about where he remembered me from. I remembered him instantly. You know what I mean? I didn't say anything to him, and if it happened today, I still wouldn't say anything to him. It's I'm a different person now. It's not that I have different morals or values or perspectives or anything necessarily. It's just that as I said earlier, I have things to live for now. I didn't back then. I think most people share that when you're in the military. When you're deploying, especially, you don't need anything to live for. You don't need that dragging you down and holding you back. You don't need that stress, that worry that's constantly nagging in the back of your head, um, about what's going on back home, what's happening to the people, what's happening to your money, what's happening. I mean, whatever. It's hard. It's hard to get it, stay detached. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.
You did. That was actually um, an excellent way to answer that. I don't know. I don't think excellent's the right word to describe that because that's going to build off what we're going to pick up on for our next interview segment. And that'll bring up a point I'll talk to off camera. But I wanted to end with this photograph that I may or may not have possibly yoinked from your Reddit page. That's neither here nor there, though. We'll get to that later. But it's a great photograph to bring up of young McCall that I think is that's not what I wanted to
Uh
open
oh.
that in. Oh no, where's it? There we
Is,
go.
is it the slingshot or is it the birds?
Nah, we're gonna save the slingshot
All
photograph
right.
for another way to end this one off. You'll enjoy this one though. At least I hope that you will. But
Yeah. Yeah, there's a real funny story behind that. I don't know if you want me to go off on it.
man, let's go hear the story. That's how we ended
All
today.
right. So this was in Haditha. No, no, I'm sorry. This was in HIT. Um, a city called Hit. So I went to Hit probably three times. Three times. I went to Haditha four times or three times as well. So Hit, I was there after the first invasion, and then I was there for the subsequent invasions because we would take it and hand it over to whoever, pretty much the army. I don't mean any disrespect, but the army is a good occupational force. They're not really good at storming the castle, so to speak. at this time, this unit that was there. Anyway, they lost the city. We took it back. They lost it again. We took it back again. This was on the push. So I was with 3-2. I think this was Kilo 3-2. And I pushed out with, or no, this was Lima 3-2. And I was pushed out with a public affairs Marine. His name, he probably wouldn't mind. He probably wouldn't mind you contacting him. Honestly, he's a Bostonian. He's a really cool guy named Lucian Friel. He took this photo, and he was public affairs Marine, photojournalist, and he had been in the Marine Corps a couple years less than I had. But I met him on this operation, and he was just as exacerbated by all of it as I was. You know, I had been in country for like 6 to 8 months by this point. He had been there just as long. We were both just exhausted and tired, mentally, physically, emotionally. Anyway, we were trying to find ways to make ourselves laugh, and we were going house to house searching at this point. And we would go in the houses and find paintings and pictures of birds, ducks, animals, whatever, and we would take photos like this. We would sight in on the bird like we're hunting it and take a photo. There was one photo of there was I mean it was crazy because we were in the middle of Iraq and we were in this house and they had no art on the walls except for this picture. It was a large photo of this little blonde white girl and a duck. She was holding the duck and their faces were next to each other smiling. And I have a picture of Lucian with his face next to it smiling. We have pictures with like family photos that were hanging on people's walls and they're in poses. I would pose with them and like we'd take the photos with them. And that was just our way of keeping ourselves entertained. You know, honestly, we were bored, we were tired. I took that photo. There's actually the funny story behind that photo is you could see the door behind me on the right, but there was another door just off frame on the left, and they both went into the same room. So if you were with us, I was with a fire team. All of the Marines, we were searching the house and we were basically done. But the owner of the home was in the living room with the squad, with our squad leader was with our fire team, and they were in that room behind. And when Lou took that photo and his shutter clicked, the owner of the house came walking through that door and saw me like sighted in on his photo of birds, you know. And I remember I kind of just looked at him like, "Oh God," and he looked at me like, "What the fuck?" And he just started laughing, man. He cracked up. I'll see if I can find more of the photos of me and Lou doing that stupid shit because there were some really good ones. There are photos. There's this one of this little tiny kid. He's probably like 4 or 5 years old, and it's a big poster of him. He's dressed like the Ayatollah. I swear, like head to toe, like dressed to the nines. And there's a photo of Lou next to him. I mean, it's just great. So I'll see if I can find any of that, and I'll share it with you because that's some pretty good stuff.
Hell yeah, man. And I'll say this on camera. And for you, you can correct, chime in whenever. But with that stuff that makes you laugh, that stuff that brings back those funny memories, dude. I love to focus on that for you. Because I don't want everything to always be down and depressing about your time, because that's not what I'm here for. But absolutely, dude, you find some of that shit. We will spend a whole segment breaking down these funny ass photographs that you have and just talking about that. But Kevin, like I told you the other day, man, anytime I get you on, and with your story and your journey that we're gonna tell, as always, and even when I see you in person, brother, thank you for your service and welcome home.
I appreciate that, man. Thank you.
All right.